I'm Catherine Arndt, the Chief of the VLGA Connect Studio. Welcome to today's episode, brought to you by the VLGA, your councillor support network and the national broadcaster on all things local government.
Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to TGU. It's our final edition for the year, and what a wonderful special opening we've just seen. In fact, it's a little bit disappointed that you're now stuck with the real versions of us rather than those very colourful, Julie's laughing, animated versions. Did you like the animated version of yourself, Julie?
Oh, look, it was very flattering. It was beautiful. Thank you very much.
And Tony, I think it was very flattering for you as well.
Oh, slightly better looking than me, I think, to be honest.
Well, and and Catherine and her reindeer was lovely.
Oh,
It was lovely to have her kicking off
gorgeous.
the show. So, for those of you listening to this on your podcast player, you've missed a very special little opening for our last episode of the year. So, if you want to know what we're talking about, go back and have a look at the YouTube version at your leisure. Another big week in local government to wrap up the year. We've got lots to talk about today. We've got some pretty unsavoury stuff, if I can say that up front. We've got some councillor movements, CEO movements around the sector today, a few big stories from interstate as well. So let's get into it and get this one out of the way. Things turned ugly this week at Glen Ira City Council. Tony and Julie, we've talked about in the lead up to this, the council considering closing its three council-run early learning centres. They made the decision to do that this week. The gallery did not take the news very well. Someone in the gallery, we're told, it's been reported, threw an egg at the councillors, and I'm told by Jim McGee directly, the former mayor, that he had some egg material, I'm assuming eggshell, stuck in his eye for a considerable amount of time. It's caused an injury to him, and I think the police are now involved. This is just ugly, unsavoury stuff. What do we say?
Atrocious behaviour. Absolutely, the terrible behaviour. I watched the meeting online, and it's right at the conclusion of the meeting after a difficult debate that I thought was handled really well by the council group. The mover of the resolution, Councillor McGee, I thought a powerful speech. Mentioned the high regard he and each of his colleagues had for the opposing views around the table. It was just a really difficult decision, but clearly an emotive one in the community, and someone just lost the plot. Clearly planned. They've brought the egg in to the chamber, and I understand Victoria Police are involved, Chris and Julie, and just a circumstance we just don't want to see repeated.
No, and Chris, these are councillors that are just doing their job.
Correct.
And this is a place of work, so they don't expect this to happen, and this is really, really disheartening to hear that it's now got to this physical state where people feel that they have to incite physical violence to make a point. It's just not on. It's not on, and I just send my thoughts out to those councillors that have had to experience that, and I'm sure that the council have security measures in place. I'm sure they do to protect people, but these types of things that happen that can't be controlled are really disappointing, and let's just hope that going forward things will be safe for Glen Ira in what was a democratic decision.
And I think what's disappointing is that for those councillors who would have opposed the resolution and wanted to maintain the early learning centres, that this behaviour just, I'm sure they would be strongly opposed to it, and it reflects really poorly on that, defensible argument that they had to as the mover of the resolution said, really difficult decision, understandable, there being views on either side. And I feel for those, well-meaning people that came to the chamber, wanting to demonstrate a particular view, and now perhaps this really poor behaviour is somehow seen to be, reflective on them. It's terrible.
So where are we going with this? One council has, I think it's Kingston, don't quote me, put some glass panels up between the public gallery and the council, and I think copped a bit of flack for doing that. But we've all been in council chambers, I think, when there's been heated and contentious issues and temperatures rise. But I've never been in a council meeting when something like this has bubbled over so badly. But it seems to be that there's more of this type of thing potentially happening, doesn't it? So where does this end?
I mean, thankfully, it's still a rare occurrence, and Councillor McGee's probably in good company. There's been a few very famous people who've suffered from this sort of egging type thing. But yeah, I don't know, Chris, in terms of answering your question, there is, I think people coming along, having a strong view is one thing, but people coming along with a lack of respect and wanting to, have it out and personalize it and attack individuals for their view is just something that we just, it's not, I hate that word being un-Australian, but it actually is something that no one who would support, the democratic values here would argue for.
As you say, Tony, when you get to name calling, when you get to violence, you've lost the argument. You lose the high moral ground. It's just not a mature way of having a debate about anything, is it? All right, our thoughts go out to Jim and the other two councillors. I think sort of three councillors were in the firing line for that, from what I've been told, and we hope they're okay. And maybe the silver lining is here. I'm assuming it was the last meeting of the year, so people can sort of take stock and hopefully come back refreshed next year. When I talk about more and more of this happening, a mayor in Queensland was physically accosted last week. I don't think it was at a council meeting, but it was just after an official function. This is in Scenic Rim, and that council's made some pretty strong statements about condemning that sort of behaviour as well. So I just do worry. I'm here and see more and more of this at the moment, sadly.
Yeah, and it's good that the council have put a really, really strong message out to the community on their website, Chris, and they're saying councillors stand united in zero tolerance for abuse. And this is, this is a really, really clear message to the community to say we are not going to accept this kind of abuse as elected officials. They take a dim view of bullying and harassment, and, particularly aimed at the councillors or officers. So good on them for putting that out really, really strongly to the community. Disrespectful and violent behaviour is not going to be tolerated, and I'm sure that all councils will agree with that. And I think messages of those sort to be put out to the community are really important.
Okay, a story that's popped up in The Age this week, and there might not be a lot we can say about this because we haven't seen the arbiter's decision. In fact, I don't think it's been tabled yet, but The Age seems to have seen a copy of an arbiter decision relating to Hobson's Bay in this case, the council that I was CEO of some time ago now, and a councillor who was there then and still is now, long-term councillor Tony Briffa, former mayor, has been found to have breached the code, according to The Age, over comments made in tweets and a press release about MP Moira Deeming. Interesting that this one hasn't been tabled anywhere yet, Tony, but The Age seems to have gained access to a copy of it.
Yeah, I have read that report in The Age, and of course we're not sure how accurate it is, but it does seem to quote the findings of the apparent arbiter, a lawyer, Joanne Mazzeo, and it concerns allegations brought by Councillor Daria Callender against Councillor Tony Briffa, and it's surrounding a tweet that Councillor Briffa made that references Moira Deeming, the former councillor and now Upper House MP, and according to the report, the findings are that that tweet fell below the standard of conduct to be expected of a councillor, in that it didn't treat Ms. Deeming with dignity, fairness, objectivity, and respect. It related to the signing of a certain petition that was a controversial petition, I think, that was against gender-neutral toilets, and Ms. Deeming was one of the signatories or petitioners. And I think according to the media report, part of the concern of the arbiter was the singling out of the one petitioner here in the tweet. But I guess we'll wait and see if we get a copy of a tabled decision. I'll be able to read over that and perhaps have a more considered comment.
Yeah, fair enough too. According to the story, there is a statement from Councillor Briffy here saying, "I will continue to proudly support, defend, and advocate for LGBTIQA+ people, including trans women." And Tony has been a strong advocate and vocal supporter of that community for a long period of time. Celebrated really as the world's first intersex mayor when Tony first became a mayor some time ago. The arbiter says that Tony was not using inclusive language and did not intend to be. I'm sorry, that's in relation to another comment, but it was about inclusive language, disrespect, etc. I'm a bit challenged, Tony and Julie, about the freedom of speech element of this, with commentary on stuff that's in the public domain. But as you say, Tony, we probably need to see more detail before we could say too much more.
Yeah, I think there was no sanction according to the media report.
That's right.
And I think that was because I believe that the arbiters commented on Councillor Briffer's measured, respectful approach during the hearing. And I think Councillor Briffer said that they had not been directly approached by Ms. Deeming about the comments, and if they had have been, then they would have treated Ms. Deeming, in a respectful way, would have discussed the matter with her. So I think that that's another element to the decision. But it's again a reminder to councillors about social media and the risks of commentary in social media and singling people out, I suspect. But let's read the decision when it comes out.
All right. By the time we come back next year, it'll probably have been and gone, and we'll be on to other things. But we'll keep an eye out for that. Talking about councillors and use of social media, a councillor, now former councillor at Frankston, that we've talked about on this program before, Stephen Hughes, just finished, I think, a suspension, the third suspension since being elected in 2020. He's resigned from the council, Tony.
Yes, he has. He's put up a Facebook post giving his reasons, which basically expand on he's had a consistent view that he's put about, believes there's a waste of money, squandering of money there at council. He's clearly got a flair for writing, Councillor Hughes. If you read his Facebook post, lots of sort of references to, lifetime passes at Wobby's World and Charlie and the Chocolate Factory and these sorts of things. I think we'll say if we're going to miss Councillor Hughes, it'll be that flair for his creative writing, if anything. But no, he's resigned, and I guess that's another count back scenario once more in Frankston in the new year, I imagine.
I'm just waiting on the question from Julie.
Yes, and what are we up to, Chris? What's
I think
the
we're at 50,
or the end of
50,
2023?
I think we're at 59.
59.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, we've had a couple added
Over to
recently.
60. Yeah.
Sadly, we've got a by-election or a countback at Glen Iro because of the passing of a councillor. We've now got this one at Frankston in the new year. We have a new councillor at Maroondah after the by-election there. That was with the resignation of Marika Graham back in, I think it was September. So a new councillor will be sworn in. If not already, they may well have been sworn in. I'm just looking for the name
Chris
of that
person.
Chris Jones, thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
He's a self-made tech leader. He describes himself as a successful startup, but he's a long-term local resident, grew up in Nunawading, first home in Blackburn. So, congrats to him representing, I think, that Croydon area.
Barngeong Ward. Barngeong, is that the way to say it, do you think?
Mm. And it's quite tough, isn't it, coming in the last year when, you know, you've got a group of really experienced councillors and you come in really fresh to be able to sort of get up to speed really quickly and then, you know, get runs on the board. It's quite quite tough for councillors coming in this late, I think. But anyway.
Well, it is. You know, you're inside 12 months. It's going to be a more political sort of environment, I think, in that last year. We're seeing in other states where elections are due, like New South Wales is due next September. Queensland's coming up in March. There's been a few resignations there. For the most part, they seem to be carrying those vacancies through until till the election. Not always. In Queensland, some councillors are being appointed to fill gaps. But I did notice one thing we've talked about on the program before, Tony, is the quirky situation in New South Wales where you can be elected to state parliament and maintain your councillor role. A Liverpool councillor this week has made the decision to step aside, was appointed the government whip, I think, in the Legislative Assembly, and the duties have become too onerous, so he's given up his councillor role. So a bit of common sense there, I think.
Yeah, I think so. The conflicts that might arise in those circumstances are just pretty profound.
Yeah.
Bizarre scenario to sit in both situations.
Julie, we've got a new CEO in the cohort in Victoria, in Greg Box, who's been announced as the CEO at Bass Coast Shire. So he'll be taking over from Ali Wasty, in effect, who's been gone for a little while, gone to Greater Geelong. Greg takes over in January. So congratulations to him.
Yeah, January the 29th, to be exact. That's when he starts. Hopefully he'll get a bit of a break between now and then. But Mr. Box, he was the General Manager of Partnerships, Economy and Culture at Bass Coast Shire. So he's been promoted from within, which is fantastic news for him. But he's had 30 years experience in local government and been in leadership roles at Yarra Ranges and the City of Greater Dandenong. So look, this was an external process. It was a big competitive process. Good on him for getting the role, and it sounds like he's earned a lot of respect in the great work that he's done there already down at Bass Coast. And I think he's got his eye on innovation, I think, going forward for Bass Coast and the community, which is nice to hear, isn't it, Chris?
It is, absolutely. And a bit of change for that organisation, because Greg being elevated to the CEO role, James Sturton is leaving to go to Greater Geelong to work with Ali Wasty. So there'll be an opportunity, I guess, really for him to put his mark on the structure of that organisation in due course. So if for those of you who are tracking the current CEO situation in the state, we've got 3 pending. Moira, which must be getting close, I would have thought.
Very close.
Very close. It sounded like you might know something.
No,
Julie?
I just said it must be very
just
close. I was told weeks ago it was close, so I'm hoping it's very close now.
Stand by for some news there potentially. Glenelg, of course, and East Gippsland Shire. So they'll take a little while. And of course, it's going to be a challenging space for particularly, I guess, East Gippsland as you get into the new year and less than 12 months out from election, when you're making a decision like that as to who's going to be in the CEO chair. I imagine some deep conversations being had by those councillors in particular. All right. What else is on the list? We've got a lot to get through today, and we might just mention some of this in passing. I do want to touch on a bit of news out of Bawbaw this week, because this goes back to something that was mentioned on the program with Tony some months ago. A former councillor made some allegations on the way out about planning and procurement processes at Bawbaw Shire. The CEO, to his credit, very swiftly launched an independent investigation into those matters. The results have come in and everyone there has been cleared of wrongdoing. And I think both Tony and Julie have some connection to this or have provided some advice along the way.
Yeah, that's right, Chris. I've actually been involved in this. So, and look, I've given the council some professional observations of the space that they've landed in. But yeah, look, the council are in a good space. What's happened is that they've been given some recommendations as to what changes they could potentially make to their procurement processes just to improve things. Like any audit that comes out of local government, there will always be improvement opportunities. And I think what I've tried to say to the council, this is not unusual for you to have some minor sort of improvements that you need to look at. And there's definitely a commitment from the council to undertake those works, which is great. Look, we're finding that these kind of situations, they're very, very costly for the council to respond to. And there's a lot of pressure around these kind of issues as well, and how it impacts on both councillors and staff. And that was certainly one thing that was observed. But we're talking about local government in these constrained resource environments that where the staff are really, really busy and don't always get it completely right. But fundamentally, there was no significant finding. There was no evidence of collusion, fraud or corruption, and some minor changes that they will make to improve their systems. But overall, a stressful situation for the council, and one that they've come through and handled, I think, very professionally. So a good result at the end of the day.
So two independent reports there, one from a law firm, not mine, into the planning decision, one from a sort of forensic consulting firm into procurement processes. And as Julie says, the outcome of those reports was firstly, in relation to council officers, no wrongdoing found by any council officer, and no evidence of any councillor misconduct. But as Julie says, some recommendations for process improvements. And I understand that council is already implementing some of those recommendations there, led by the CEO there, Mark Dupay, of course, and the Mayor, Anne-Marie McCabe, I think is the Mayor out there.
Yes, yes.
And I think one of the learnings that came from me, Chris, is the importance of the audit committee in all of this, the audit and risk committees, that they play this really, really strong role in supporting the councils through these kinds of investigations, which is really critical. The other thing that came from this was, the proactive nature of the organisation to go to IBAC and go to the Local Government Inspectorate, and for them to come back and say there's nothing here for us to investigate, it is all clear, all good to go, was a good message that came back from those integrity agencies. So the importance of the integrity agencies in this, and the audit and risk committee, I think, was a good learning and focus for me.
Good outcome. All right. So well done to all, and to you too for your advisory roles in that one. The final mayoral election for the year has been conducted. I think there's one outstanding deputy mayor appointment still to come at Greater Shepparton, unless I've missed that, I'll double check. But Wodonga this week saw Ron Mildren returned to the mayoralty. So that's a second consecutive term there. And Danny Chamberlain is the new deputy mayor. I think Danny's one who came in on one of the countbacks during this term. So best of luck to that team. I think in both cases it was a 4-3 vote, so it was contested. And that completes the list of mayors for the run-up to the election next year.
Wow. We're finally there.
We're finally there. It feels like it's taken a while, doesn't it? Well, the first one I think was Warrnambool, which was in October, and then it's come and we've come through to the second week of December to get them finished. What is next on my list? Let's have a look here. This one I know caught. Actually, I'm going to skip that one just for a moment. We're talking about processes and improvements, etc. I see that Tony Kingston City Council, of course, former stomping ground for Julie, has adopted some of the Operation Sandon recommendations off the bat, and they're going to trial those. Things like banning en bloc voting, recording individual votes as a matter of course on each resolution. Interesting to see a council being so much on the front foot here.
Yeah, proactive, I think, and I think Kingston early on looked at their processes and their level of exposure to some of the things that Operation Sand and IBAC looked into, given their proximity to Casey and the that particular developer who was discussed in that report operating in the Kingston area as well. I think there was another law firm that made an investigation and made some recommendations. And Kingston on the front foot, as you say, with these changes to basically governance procedures without needing to change their governance rules in itself. So that trial starts in January 24, a 4-month trial of these new processes, some new protocols for briefings, for meetings, some practice notes to be launched for meeting procedure. So that'll be really interesting. I'm really looking forward to reading some of the ideas that come out of that trial, because they may well be sort of an early indicator of some of the statewide changes that may be introduced on the back of Operation Sandon's recommendations.
And of course, we're not suggesting that other councillors don't do some of these things. I do know some councils don't do en bloc voting and consciously rule that out, if you like. Some councils already record individual votes on particular resolutions. It's the first time I've seen a suite like this, though, brought forward, particularly in response to Operation Sandon. Julie?
Yeah, look, Chris, and I think there's probably a little bit of sensitivity there because of the reference in this report, which I'm aware of. This was the I think the Chelsea Mordialloc Mentone News. This was sensitive a while ago because of the fact that there were allegations made in the community of corruption that was linked to some of the same people who were involved in the Operation Sandon case. So John Woodman, Megan Schutz, Lorraine Reeford, and one of the lobbyists, Phil Standall. So there was an investigation carried out at the time, as Tony said, from a law firm, but they included that there was no evidence that there was improper conduct, corrupt conduct, or any misconduct, anything like that. There was no findings in that space. And so therefore, it was put to bed at that time. However, I'd imagine that there are still a number of councillors that are around when that happened. And I imagine that they're alert to that, the fact that the community have made those allegations in the past and they want to be on the front foot. And I think this is great. I think this is a really, really good initiative by the council to trial something like this and see how it goes.
Tony, Christmas has gone missing in Stonington, I hear.
Well, according to reports, I think today, out in the Age today, there's a bit of a backlash to the Christmas decorations in Stonington this year, at least from some in the community. The decorations, the pictures I've seen have language like "make merry" and didn't specifically mention the word Christmas.
Yeah.
And there is a petition, apparently, according to this media report, a petition being gathered, calling on council to include specific references to the word Christmas and Christmas symbols in future in its festive decorations at this time of year. I'm not sure, Chris and Julie, whether or not this was a deliberate move from council to, exclude that Christmas language,
or the flip side, to be deliberately more inclusive for people who don't recognise or celebrate Christmas, perhaps.
Look, and if that, my view, if that's what they're intended, you got to think that one through, because if you're going to have a happy Diwali or a happy Hanukkah sign up as well, you're doing exactly the same thing that you're trying not to do here. So I think my view is celebrate the festival by the name of the festival,
Yeah.
we all refer it's Christmas, whether you put a religious context on that or not. Come on, but
Yeah,
anyway, we'll see the statement that comes out. I haven't seen anything yet.
I'm just shaking my head, Chris, because
Hmm.
Christmas always brings these debates. We
Well,
have this
it used to
debate
be,
every single year about
didn't
how
it?
do we label it? How do we, what do we put out there in the community? Are there enough Christmas
How
decorations?
much
Are
money
there
do we
too much?
spend
How
on
much
them?
money
Yeah,
have we
yeah.
spent?
Mm.
What's the situation here? Are we going to upset anyone? It's just every single year we have this debate, and it's just interesting that council always gets targeted. They always get targeted in this space for something that's not quite right. So
It's
I
a bit
think when you go
tiring, isn't
too
it?
far to try not
Yeah.
to cause offence, I mean, we're calling it Christmas. We're not trying to exclude people who don't
No.
celebrate that. Well, we know it's a season for everyone to be, with their loved ones, with their, be close to people, whether it has another religious meaning for you or not. And I think sometimes we can go too far in that attempt to be neutral and inclusive, to actually be bland and mean sometimes.
It'd be interesting to get some feedback from viewers and listeners on this one. It is, as Julie says, a regular debate this time of year, and it's quite tiring, to be honest.
it is
I
tiring.
think up in Forster in New South Wales, there's been a scandal this year about a Christmas tree that was labelled as pathetic, I think.
Pathetic.
Or yeah. And I think they've thrown their hands up for this year and given up and said perhaps we'll try again next year. But we see these stories every year at this time, don't we? And councils, as you say, Julie, a bit damned if they do, damned if they don't.
I know it's a no-win situation. You just got to get on with it and do the best you can. Maybe
Yep.
just be reasonable about how much you spend, and but if you have a look, at the pictures of what's happening in London, I mean the Christmas decorations are amazing.
Yeah.
They are absolutely phenomenal, and I just look at them with awe. And then I look at what we've got here and I go, yeah, it's a little bit average. But, maybe it's businesses that are tipping into
Yeah.
that in London. I don't know. But I mean, I look at the difference and I just go, wow,
Julie,
stark.
check out at South Bank. There's a water fountains and projected images, and then the Melbourne Town Hall is pretty exciting, colour and
It does look good.
stuff.
That
It's
would
a
be
lot
the
going on
exception, I
in
would
the
say.
CBD at the moment.
Yeah, you're right, Tony, and I should have mentioned that because they have done a great job in the CBD, but it's cost them as well. But it's overseas it's just phenomenal. So anyway, a modest Christmas decoration and celebration is always a good thing in the community's eyes.
All right. Are we done on Christmas? Notice we're using the word Christmas a lot. Don't shy away from that at all. But apparently the word's gone missing in Stonington, which is how we got onto this, which has upset some folks.
And I've got a Christmas report at the end as well, Chris. So
oh yes, looking forward to
Christmas
that.
is not over yet. So
we'll get to that.
Share with the listeners.
We'll get to that shortly. A couple of interstate stories certainly worthy of note this week. We reported a few weeks back at the start of November, I think it was, the Mayor of Canada Bay had been found to have engaged in serious corrupt conduct by ICAC. He was, this is Angelo Sarikas, was suspended pretty much immediately by the local government minister. He's taken his time, a bit over a month, to make a determination on what happens next, and has this week dismissed Mr. Sarikas from the mayoral office and barred him from civic office for 5 years. So that's a pretty serious outcome, Tony.
Yeah, well, a serious finding, though, serious corrupt conduct between November 2015 and February 2019. So one would think requires a serious sanction, and that's what's occurred.
Yes,
probably appropriate.
There's an acting mayor there, and I think a process underway to fill what will now be a councillor vacancy potentially. But as I mentioned before, New South Wales council elections are due in September. They've got a 2-year, 8-month term effectively this time around because their elections were delayed by COVID. In South Australia, 2 councillors have been told more than a year after they were elected that they were actually not elected. They were incorrectly declared as the winners of I think, a four-way contest in this particular instance, with human and computer error being blamed, and they're expected to file with the Court of Disputed Returns to get some sort of resolution to this. So it affects two councillors, two candidates. One thing here, Tony, which I did note, which was good to see, everyone agrees that the decisions the council has made in the interim are lawful and will stand. So it doesn't call into question any of those decisions they've made today.
Well, that's that. At least there is that element. But yeah, you feel sorry for all four of these people. The councillors who think thought they had a mandate and now potentially need to resign, or a decision by the Court of Disputed Returns might require that. And those councillors those individuals who apparently ought to have been installed as councillors, who've missed out on a couple of years of service, or a year or so of service. I think it was the 2022 general election. Really unfortunate error, and we're glad that it seems that these things are a very rare occurrence.
This is Adelaide Plains Council, by the way, Julie, if you're wondering which council we're talking about. The CEO of the Local Government Association of South Australia has come out and made some comments here, as you would expect, very disappointed in this, looking for some sort of assurances that this sort of thing won't happen in future. I understand that 25 of the 180 or so elections used this software because they were more complex. The other 24 have been analysed and would not have returned a different result. So it's just this one council that's been impacted. While we're in South Australia, Tony, another very interesting one at Robe, where the Ombudsman has found a councillor there should have declared I think he called it a perceived conflict of interest in relation to some matters that he brought forward, reviewing the chief executive's performance process or employment process, I think it was. But there's a bit more behind this, isn't there? Interesting background.
Really unusual set of circumstances, Chris and Julie here. So this is a finding concerning Councillor Nick Brown by the South Australian Ombudsman, and there's been an order for him to apologise in relation to conflict of interest matters. What this is about is that prior to Councillor Brown becoming a councillor, he was a council officer at Robe District Council, and there was a vacant CEO vacancy, and he applied for that role in 2019, but he lost out to a colleague, Mr. Hollyman, in the selection process, and Mr. Hollyman was appointed CEO, and Mr. Brown was appointed deputy CEO. Well, things got a bit weird after that, because
yes, you can say that again.
Yeah. Well, later in the year 2019, the CEO made the deputy CEO position redundant. So Mr. Brown lost that role, and then in 2022, prior to the council elections later that year, in 2022, the CEO, Mr. Hollyman, was given a 4-year contract extension, and that was followed by the council election. And guess who gets elected?
Not Mr. Brown.
Mr. Nick Brown becomes the
Yes.
councillor
Yeah.
in 2022. So early in 2023, Councillor Nick Brown brought a motion calling for council to seek advice on the CEO contract extension shortly, the extension having been implemented shortly prior to a council election cycle. The CEO was suspended initially on full pay. Ultimately, the investigation was finalised and the CEO resigned, and Councillor Brown had a leading role in all these processes. Well, the Ombudsman's investigation turns out that the Ombudsman felt that Councillor Brown should have declared, as you say, a perceived conflict of interest when submitting his motions and discussing them. Of course, in Victoria, under the Local Government Law, Local Government Act, that a councillor would be required not only to declare but not to participate.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that difference.
The vote. given the conflict of interest. But yeah, there was a sense that, there was some evidence that Councillor Brown had told people that he wanted to get back at Mr. Hollyman. At least that was an element that was considered by the Ombudsman. But relatively light sanction, I think, here. He's been ordered to apologise in the chamber.
Yeah. Yeah, and I guess the Ombudsman's had some regard to the role of the councillor in managing the employment relationship or the employment life cycle of the CEO as well. But any reasonable person observing would think, well, has he got an axe to grind here? Is there a conflict of interest behind his reasons for taking this action? You agree, Julie?
Yeah, that's right. It's the old pub test, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
That we refer to. You know, any reasonable-minded person would think, oh, there's a bit of a conflict there. So the pub test is always a good one to think about when you're thinking about conflicts of interest, because that's really important.
Yeah. They say truth's stranger than fiction, don't they? You probably couldn't have written that sequence of events any better. So, Tony, in Victoria, you've talked about what a councillor would have been required to do in that situation. I know that if you are a councillor at a particular council, there's a period of time whereby you can't be a member of council staff. Like you can't become on the staff.
That is a provision in.
But it doesn't work in reverse, does it?
No, and in fact, we have seen former staff members being elected to council, and that brings challenges in itself.
Yeah.
But as you say, councillors have they have an explicit role in terms of managing that employment relationship with the CEO. But yeah, I've seen challenges where former planning officers end up on council and then are making planning decisions subsequently that they may have had a role in, or they may even feel particularly qualified to second guess planning officers' decisions and those sorts of things. But it brings its challenges, but everyone has the right to run for public office, and one would think that someone who's served as a council officer would have a unique insight into the way councils ought to be run as well.
All right. Look, lots more we could talk about. I'll just mention these briefly in case people want to follow them up. The CEO of the City of Adelaide has resigned and left this week very quickly. In fact, it was announced on Wednesday, and this is Claire Mockler. She left at the end of business that day. When you hear that, you think, oh, something untoward's happened. Not the case. In this particular case, she's headed home very quickly to the UK to care for her elderly mother. So we wish Claire, who'd been at the City of Adelaide for 20 years or so, CEO for 2.5, I think, all the best with those family responsibilities that she's putting first, priorities.
And that'll be a highly regarded position. I think people Australia-wide will look at that as a...
I'm sure they will. There's
Yeah.
a Victorian connection to the acting CEO, actually. Michael Sedgman, who's the chief operating officer, has been put in there as the acting CEO. He's the former CEO of the rural city of Murray Bridge. But going back in his career, he was a CFO at, I think, the city of Yarra. Also another Victorian, might be Darebin. Someone will correct me if I'm wrong on that. So a long career in local government, which had its origins, I think, in Victoria, and he now finds himself as the acting CEO at the City of Adelaide. A little bit of insider knowledge, a little bit of gossip there for you. Up in Kyogle in New South Wales, the general manager has been sacked there without notice. The council, as it is allowed to do, has by majority vote terminated the employment of Graham Kennett, but it's not gone down well with council staff and some members of the community. This is another example, folks, of, I think, a CEO or a general manager being very much caught up in the political elements of council life. There's a petition doing the rounds amongst the local shops calling for the council to be sacked and replaced with an administrator. So that might be one to keep a watching brief on as we move into 2024.
Yes, it will be. And, we know what happened down at Warrnambool some time ago. Whether this follows in a similar direction will be interesting.
Well, yeah, I hadn't thought about that element. You're right. There's some Supreme Court case law there, which may have some relevance. The Newcastle story we touched on a few months ago, Tony, where the CEO there, Jeremy Bath, had been alleged by an MP in Parliament using parliamentary privilege to have been behind a series of letters to the local paper, the Newcastle Herald. He's been cleared of any involvement in those letters by an independent investigation. But the MP is not taking that very well and has said the matter's not over. Is making asking some questions about the terms of reference, etc., and refusing to apologise.
Yeah, I just hope he's not using that sort of parliamentary privilege to make accusations.
Sonia
Beg
Hornery is
your
her
pardon.
name.
Yeah.
Mm.
There has this. Look, I'm not particularly familiar with the processes, but if there's been an independent investigation, one would think you respect the outcome of that. But if there's further evidence, that can be raised. But yeah, it does seem like the saga goes on, Chris.
The saga is going on. There'll be more on that. The Newcastle Herald's been reporting. In fact, it was front page news this week in the Newcastle Herald on that story. Julie, a couple of stories from you on the list here. You've spotted a very nice story about a council that decided to take on a supermarket. I assume it was the only supermarket in the town, and they felt they needed to maintain it. Yeah.
Yes, that's right, Chris. This is in Western Australia. It's the Shire of Dundas. And it covers a large area. It's 93,000 square kilometres in the southeast of the state. Now, the Shire's population is only 700, so it's very, very tiny. And this town, Norseman, which is part of that, has 555 people. So the majority of the people from the municipality actually live within Norseman. So the council has acquired the local supermarket, which is, I think, an IGA supermarket. They bought that and the post office. And it's interesting that they've started to operate it as a council, and they've found in the first month that they've had a profit of 251,000, and the Shire president, Lorraine Bonza, is really happy with obviously that they've been able to make it pay in the first month. What they're going to do is put that money back into the improving the community, because they've got such a small rate base. And so rather than going cap in hand, they've taken this initiative to get into the commercial space and try and generate some income for the community. But of course, it's interesting because they've come under a bit of fire as a result of it.
Let me guess, Julie, drop our rates now because you're making so much money off the supermarket. Yeah.
That's right. So people are now expecting that. They're now saying, well, okay, well, and apparently there's been these personal attacks and harassment on social media.
Oh, no.
Surprise.
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness.
So do we expect to see more councils? I've been involved in discussions about, how do we find new revenue streams because of the pressures on the rate base? Supermarkets never came up in the discussion. Tony, do you reckon we're going to see more councils buying supermarkets?
Look, I think a community like Dundas is pretty unique, where it would have its own unique challenges. That tiny rate base, probably the major commercial, retail facility in the Shire. I'm not sure if it was at risk of closing or needed to be need an injection of capital that council could provide. Generally speaking, I sort of, councils getting into the broader commercial field, you sort of wonder whether that's in our sort of something that's wise. When I first got involved in local government, Peter Brock, the late Peter Brock, came to and said he wanted to in Hurstbridge, the service station had closed. Everyone was driving into Diamond Creek to fill up their cars with petrol, and guess what? Getting their litre of milk and all that in Diamond Creek. And Peter's idea was, let's, the community and council buy service station. We did have a look at that. In the end, we ended up setting up a community bank instead, and I was involved with Peter, as a director of that. But so sometimes councils are best placed to step in and preserve something for the long-term, benefit of the community, and this might have been one of those situations.
Yeah, market failure often is the driving thing, isn't it, for councils to get involved in things that they traditionally wouldn't.
Yeah, that's right.
Julie, you're going to take us to Lapland before we
I
wrap up
am,
today. Is this a nod to the origins of Father Christmas, Santa
It is,
Claus?
Chris. I wanted to bring the Christmas into TGU today, and the way I've done that is I really wanted to reflect on the place that Santa comes from. So, and of course, we all know Santa comes from Lapland. So what I was wondering was what's on Santa's list for his council in 2024. I don't know. I'm sure he's got things that he wants to see happen locally.
Do you think
So
he's a regular letter? Is he a regular letter writer to the
I have
Lapland Council?
no doubt. I have no doubt, but only positive, I'm sure. Probably giving the council lots of compliments about how well they're handling the situation in Lapland.
You don't think he'd be one of those regular
New building regulations, bigger chimney spaces, I think.
Yeah,
in the gallery at the council meetings?
He might have a bit of an axe to grind, but anyway, we would have to, anyway, maybe I'm being too kind to Santa, but I don't know, I just think in this time of year, you've got to reflect on these things. So, but interestingly, Chris, I did a bit of research around Lapland, and Lapland is the largest and northernmost region of Finland. Okay, just in case you didn't know that.
Yep.
And there are actually 21 municipalities in the region that cooperate in a regional council there.
Oh.
So yeah, which is interesting.
What sort of population, Julie?
Well, actually, that's interesting. I
don't know. That's all right.
A lot of reindeer, Chris.
It's quite low. It's very, very low. Very, very low. They do have a lot of animals. Yes.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that these 21 municipalities work together in this joint statutory sort of arrangement. And they, work on the focus of the well-being of the people in Lapland. So, and it's interesting there in the total of the 21, my reading of it is there's only 38 permanent employees and 24 fixed-term members of staff. So it's pretty small.
Right.
So, yeah, like bigger than Borough of Queenscliff, but yeah, but sort of very small.
And Google tells me, Julie, that the population of Lapland this year is approximately 178,000 people.
Oh, wow. It's more than what I thought, actually. So thank you for looking that one up. But interestingly, what are their focuses for going forward, and what are they lobbying about? Well, the councils there are lobbying about, trying to get a competent workforce. Who wants to go and live and work in a place like that? Well, there's 178,000 people, but it must be hard to attract a decent workforce.
And it's declining. Population decline.
Right,
yep.
There you go. They're going into this green transition. So they're obviously looking at sustainability and environment and green. They're looking at digitalisation and accessibility to their location. So, look, my conclusion is that some things are the same across the world. Even in Lapland, they've got issues of workforce, issues of sustainability, issues of digitalisation and accessibility, transport, etc. So it's the same even in Lapland as to what we're experiencing here in Victoria.
Do they have electric sleighs?
I was going to say, is there a mayoral sleigh?
There could be a mayoral sleigh. We need to look that one up. But look, what a fantastic place. I actually have been getting images coming through from a friend who's over there at the moment. And it looks like an amazing place. So look, a shout out to Santa and to Lapland. And I think I've got to sign off at that point, Chris.
That's a lovely contribution, Julie. I've got one more contribution, folks. I just want to note and get your thoughts on this. In Canada this week, a councillor has been sanctioned for calling in and participating in a council meeting while on the golf course playing golf,
Oh.
and his colleagues and some other commentators don't think that's an appropriate way to contribute to a council meeting. Can you see any problem with that?
I hope it's not a like for or against councillors. He yells out for and doesn't mean that particular for. Yeah, I've heard of multitasking, Chris and Julie. I'm not sure whether it's a political hit or not. I think he was, involved in this event that ran over, and he got on his mobile phone into the meeting. But yeah, still not a good look.
No.
In terms of trying to play golf and concentrate on a meeting. Oh, I think he was in a golf cart or something like this, wasn't he? Yeah, driving around. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. We might have just about reached the end, I think, with that one.
We need a break, don't we?
We need a break. Yes, yeah. Let's. We've jumped the shark. We've jumped the mayoral sleigh, and we're going to have a few weeks off. TGU will go into recess until I think we're going to play this by ear, probably around mid to late January. But of course, if there's some big breaking news, we might need to pull the team together. If you guys are around, we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
Tony, Julie, thank you so much for your contributions to VLGA Connect during 2023. And Tony, to the team at Hunt and Hunt Lawyers, please pass on our thanks for the ongoing support there. I wish you both a lovely, happy, safe time with family and friends over Christmas and New Year.
And
Well done,
Tony,
Chris.
is this when we open up our presents from Chris?
Oh, they
Remember?
haven't arrived. Did they not arrive? Oh my.
They're coming from Santa, I think.
Yes, they're coming from Lapland. The mayoral
chimney.
sleigh, I think, is on the charger.
Yay, fantastic. It's
Good
been an
stuff.
absolute pleasure. I just wanted to wish everybody a Merry Christmas as well. Have a great break, everybody. It's been such a pleasure working with you, Chris and Tony, this year, and look forward to what's coming in 2024.
Awesome.
Indeed.
Yeah, same. Thanks, viewers. And thank you, Chris, for pulling this ragtag duo together and making us sensible occasionally, Julie and I, and well done.
Thank you both. Always a pleasure. And thank you to you, our viewers and listeners who give us lots of feedback and continue watching and listening to our never-ending surprise. And we hope you'll be back with us in 2024 on VLGA Connect. All the very best, and we'll see you again soon.